very substantial and growing budget deficits because we are in a deep recession. My colleague from Oklahoma was speaking as I came to the chamber, and I agree with most all of that which he described with respect to hydraulic fracturing. He's describing something that affects our ability to continue to produce a domestic supply of energy. My colleague should know that we have had now from both the previous president and this president recommendations that we zero out the research and development in oil and gas development. I have restored the funding, or my colleague and I have restored the funding for that. And one of the reasons we have done it is our country leads the world, for example, in unconventional and deep well drilling. And we need to retain that advantage. We need to produce more here at home. We need to do it in the right way, but we have added the funding back. And as I indicated, both the previous administration and this administration decided not to do any of the research and development funding in drilling. But the kind of description of the shale formations that Senator Inhofe talked about earlier, 5 and 10 years ago, we couldn't drill there. That energy was not accessible to this country because we didn't have the technology and the capability. My colleague described the Bakken Shale in North Dakota, which I want to describe just for a moment, that describes why I think it's so important for us to have the research and development funding in this legislation. The Bakken Shale is a formation that's 100 foot thick and it's 10,000 feet underground. And to drill for that 100 foot thick seam, they've divided it into thirds. The top third, middle third, bottom third. They go down 2 miles with one drilling rig, 10,000 feet down, searching for the middle third of a seam of shale that is 100 foot thick. They do a big curve when they get down 2 miles, then they go out 2 miles, the same drilling rig. Down 2 miles, a large curve, and out 2 miles, following the middle third of a seam 100 foot thick called the Bakken Shale. I just asked the U.S. Geological Survey to do an assessment of what is recoverable in the Bakken Shale. They came back with their estimate after about a 2-year study and said there is 4.3 billion barrels of recoverable oil using today's technology, existing technology. It's the largest assessment of recoverable oil in the lower 48 states ever made in the history of our country. That was last year. Now, none of that was available to us a decade ago. It was there, but it wasn't available to us. How do we get that oil? Well, when they drill down with a drilling rig, and it takes about 35 days to drill that rig, drill that hole, and then move out 2 miles, then they fracture it under high pressure, hydraulic fracturing they call it, and then they tear down that rig and move it a ways away and drill another hole every 35 days. The hydraulic fracturing allows that rock formation to be fractured, the oil to drip, and they are pulling up oil out of those wells, in some cases 2,000 barrels a day. But the key to that is, number one, having done the research and development so that we lead the world in the ability to do that kind of very sophisticated exploration, and we put that funding in this bill and have always had it in this legislation, and that's what's opened up this unbelievable opportunity. And the second half of it, as my colleague described, is not something that we're doing in this bill, but the hydraulic fracturing and the ability to continue hydraulic fracturing, and my colleague has said it correctly. Decade after decade, I think nearly 50 years, no one has found any evidence that there is any contamination of groundwater with hydraulic fracturing. So I'm describing one small part of what Senator Bennett and I have done with respect to increasing our supply domestically of oil and gas. We also want to encourage the development of renewable energy, and we've done a lot of things in this legislation to do that. We want to